Hello there, TechDave strikes again, and today we are looking at the Lenovo Thinkcentre M58p. Now I managed to get my hands on the basic chassis. It's got a Core 2 Duo inside and pretty much nothing else except the motherboard. So we're going to take a quick look inside and see what we're working with. So as you can see, no GPU, no hard drive caddy, and they need a specialist hard drive caddy, which I managed to pick one up. No RAM. We do have a working DVD drive, we do have working CPU, which clocked in at dual core, clocked in at 3.0 gigahertz. And we're going to see what we can do with restoring this bare bones machine to full functionality as best we can with the parts I managed to track down on the internet. And it's kind of a budget build, but we're also going to compare the basic setup of this, and then we're going to add an SSD, a graphics card, max out the RAM to 8 gig and see what kind of performance upgrade we can get, what kind of boost in performance, and if we can make this a viable machine. So we've got the machine here. This is a slightly different one. I've got the basic chassis. It's exactly the same specs, but it's the most reliable out of all the damaged ones that I received. So give you a little bit more information. So here we've got the power supply, which you can see like a number on, but it doesn't really tell us anything about its output. But I believe it's about 250-300 watts at the most. DVD drive is perfectly functional. Everything is basically functional. But then over here, so I've managed to track this down on eBay. It cost me about 15 quid, but we'll go into pricing later on. And I managed to salvage these 2 sticks of RAM, and then I've added these 2 sticks of RAM as well for my own collection. We've got the nvidia GTX 710. It says 2GD, but it's actually just a 1GB DDR3 RAM edition. And I removed the faceplate because, as you can probably see, it's single slot, and this is the only actual single slot GPU that's in the right orientation that I can sort of fit in this machine. And I've test fitted it, but I'm just going to show you the little build process. And then we've got a somewhat questionable but fully functional hard drive here, 160 gig. So we're going to set this up with everything, but then obviously, as the title of the video is, can you save an old Core 2 Duo with an SSD? We're going to set it up max specs there, but then we're going to switch out and clone this drive once I've got it set up onto the SSD. So I'll be back with the full build. So for a little build blog, we've got the basic bare bones machine, which I've tested is fully functional as far as I can tell. So we take the caddy, we stretch in, so that because it's bends, the plastic sort of stretches in. So we're going to try the hard drive first before we move on to the SSD, and you just kind of pop the little side partitions, oh my light went out, into the caddy, making sure that there's little indents there, I don't know if you can see them, little pointy bits just there that click into the hard drive case, and then you sort of lower that in there, attach the SATA data cable and the power cable. Probably should have put the RAM in first in retrospect, but oh well. As far as I can tell, all these RAM sticks work. I haven't actually tested them yet, but they should be fully functional as far as I know. So we'll pop these 2 in because they're matched. They can go in the first slot. Don't know whether you can see this clearly on camera, but slide them down, click them in. Slide them down, click them in. Oh shit, hopefully I haven't just destroyed this fully working RAM. Or hopefully fully working, we'll find out. And then last stick of RAM's a bit fiddly because it's under all these cables. In fact, I can't even see what I'm doing. There we go, one there, lined up, drop that in. Click it in, click it in. That's the basic components that we're going to test. Now, after we've done this setup, we're going to see how Windows 10 functions, we're going to see how the computer functions in general. Then we're going to add the GPU and the SSD after doing a little bit of cloning, and then we'll sort of see a direct comparison of how this machine functions with its basic setup and then with the SSD and graphics card. So as you can see, I've saved you the exquisite torture of the experience of not only testing and implementing all the parts that we just installed, but that we've got them fully functioning and a fully activated version of Windows 10 Home. So as you can see here, we've got the Core 2 Duo E8400 at 3 GHz, 8 gigs of RAM, blah 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 blah. We've got fully activated Windows 10, and oh, that looks crackly, and about 120 gig free on our hard drive. So I'm going to download now some little benchmarking software, and but just quickly before we do that, I want to show you the disk usage on Windows 10. So we've got performance, and this is quite common, and this is sort of what prompted my investigation into these computers as to what can be done to save them, because we're getting 100% disk usage on this old hard drive. I'm going to run something called a program to test how well the hard drive works, but also just performance in general is pretty scatty and all over the place. As you can see, we've got 1 socket, 2 cores, 2 processors, and the CPU seems to be fine. The 8 gigs of RAM is more than enough, but this disk usage is quite alarming, and I think that's to do with Windows 10, but we're going to look into that further. So I'll be back with some benchmarks and benchmarking software. So actually it looks like Windows 10, rather like in classic Windows 10 styling, is downloading and installing updates in the background without informing me. So that explains the heavy disk usage. Let's see what it's like in a minute without that once the updates are done. So as you can now see, we're on fully updated. There's no more background nonsense going on. There is the option to go to Windows 10 version 1909, which I'm not going to do just yet because I don't see the point, it'll waste time. But as you can see, the disk usage has fallen down to 13%. Now I don't know whether that will be sustainable, but we've actually got a much more balanced, less terrifying disk usage there. I mean, it still rockets up at times, but I think that is clearly resolved, whatever that issue is. It's actually showing the 8 gig RAM as DDR2. I thought it was DDR3, but apparently it's DDR2, so that's absolutely fine. So just to clarify that. And the first thing I'm going to do is run user bench. Now I'll either fast forward this, which is going to check the processor, graphics, fixed drives, memory and USB drives, and we're just going to run that and sort of see what the outcome is, and I'll either speed it up or jump straight back in at the end. There we go. So we do have our completed user bench score. So gaming, we're on 11%, tree trunk, desktop, raft. So let's see what these are. Seal classifications, so we won't worry about that. Workstation, 16%. So overall this PC is performing above expectations, 66th percentile. This means that out of 100 PCs with exactly the same components, 34 performed better. The overall percentile is the average of each of its individual components. Below average single core score, the CPU can handle email, web browsing, audio video playback, but will struggle to handle modern games or video editing. With a gaming score of 27%, this CPU's suitability for 3D gaming is poor. Graphics 0.52% is too low to play 3D games and use CAD packages, which is unsurprising because we're on the basic Intel graphics. Mechanical or hybrid drive, which is in the red, so that's not looking good. 8 gig of RAM is absolutely sufficient. It's also good for what we're using, and Windows 10 is fine. So here you see the CPU, the actual benchmark score is poor, but it's quite good, performing better than it should, or better than expectations. The graphics are performing above expectations, so that's good. Hard drive, stupidity blue 160. It's not actually a blue, I don't think. I think it's a black. Performing as expected. RAM as expected. So in general, sort of, it's not looking so hot basically in terms of performance. So we're going to move on to the next benchmark now. I'll be back with that. So here we are with the next test that we're going to do. We're going to run a full benchmark using Passmark Performance Test 9.0. It's just the free edition. And again, we're just going to let it run with the footage sped up. So we've got a Passmark rating of 534.1 with CPU being in the 14th percentile, graphics 12th, 8th, 24th for memory, and 26th for disk. So we can view a comparison, but for now I'm just going to save that and I'll be back. And just to show before we move on to the next benchmark, this is the kind of, it's worse than 25% of all scores, it's in the 5th percentile, so it's a pretty low score. And then next we've done user bench and Passmark, so now I'm going to run this thing called HD Tune, which basically analyzes the disk in terms of stability, so we can see into what quality the disk is in. So I'm going to let that run. Read error test aborted. So error scan, there we go, that's what we're looking for. And being as this is likely to take quite a bit of time, I'm going to come back once it's completed. So it found 3 bad sectors already, these little red ones here, but I decided to click quick scan and start it again to see if it runs any more efficiently. You can see that it's not identified those 3 bad sectors, but it's not going to take me 5 hours to get the test done. I'll try and mute me munching. And based on that limited scan, no bad sectors, although it came up with 3 before, so I should imagine had I left it, I would have come across more bad sectors. But in theory, it is a functional hard drive with 0 damaged blocks, so that shows you that the hard drive itself is stable. So to benchmark a game, as you can see we've got fraps up here in the top left corner. I thought that I would run through the, let's see what level we got, Nova Prospect in Half-Life 2, because this machine only has 128 megabytes of dedicated video RAM, and it was the only game in my collection that I thought might feasibly run. I'm going to do a benchmark now and then play for a few minutes so you can sort of see what's going on here. And other than a bit of crackling, which is only on my video card, this is actually looking alright. It's playable. I've no longer got the frame counter up because I did a little benchmark run for certain period of time, but like this is definitely playable, and I'm not getting any weird slowdown or anything. It looks fluid. Let's try putting the frame counter back on. Nothing's happening. I muted the audio so that we haven't got any copyright infringement, but yeah, this is playable. It looks fine. It's at 1080p. Let's just see what video settings I've put it on. So I've got it at 1080p 60:9 full screen. Let's see, on advanced we've got DirectX 9, I assume it's just because of the integrated graphics, anisotropic filtering 2 times, no anti-aliasing, vertical sync disabled, motion blur disabled, multicore rendering enabled, high dynamic range full if available, high, low, reflect world, medium and enabled. So that's kind of the baseline for it. I'll be back just to discuss the results of the brief benchmarking I did. So it looks a bit amateur, but basically we've got average frames per second of 25 frames per second, minimum 17 and maximum of 32 in Half-Life 2, over 827 frames or 32,421 milliseconds. So that gives us a rough indicator. We're getting about 25 frames per second at the moment, so that will become more relevant when we've done the upgrades, which I shall now move on to do by adding, well, first of all we're going to clone the hard drive to an SSD. They're almost identical in size. The SSD is about 30 gig bigger or 20 gig bigger, and then we shall run all these tests again. I won't make them as drawn out and showing them all in detail as I did before, if that is indeed how I end up editing it. But yeah, we're going to run user bench, Half-Life 2, we're going to, HD Tune won't work probably on the SSD, but it should be better optimised because it's Windows 10, and Passmark, and then we'll do a comparison. So just while I remember, I'm going to try and do a quick recording of the boot time. So I'm going to do this off camera, but bang. We're going to see how long it takes to get just to the lock screen with the hard drive, no other updates at all. So it was a bit late on that, but it was about 34 seconds, which isn't actually that bad. But then if we log in, I'm just going to turn away and see how long it takes to open up Task Manager. So as you can see, it's still taking its time to open. There we go. And then Task Manager. Normally I'd do a browser, but the browser might take a bit too long. So let's see, we're on 1 minute 20 seconds with the clock on the camera, which is about 5-6 seconds before, and we're into Task Manager. So in total we're looking about 1 minute and 20, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Just quickly, I've just installed the SSD to this external caddy, so I'm going to format it, and then I'm going to use macro reflect to so just formatting it. Then we're going to use macro and reflect to make a clone of the drive, and I'll be back once it's cloned and fully installed. So much to my annoyance, this system's hard drive won't clone to an SSD with macro and reflect. It's throwing up error 9, which I don't know what that means. I tried running check disk, which is what I recommended on the Macro and Reflect website, and to no avail, because it got stuck on 13% and wouldn't progress. So instead, we're going to open this bad boy up. We're going to install the graphics card, which is here, and the SSD, and I have to do a fresh install, which I'm probably not going to activate. So we're just taking out the old hard drive there. So basically I'm going to have to do a fresh install of Windows 10, And everything that I've already done with this system has to be done again, much to my dismay, disappointment, but I accept it. It's part of the computer building process, you know, like you just gotta roll with the punches, man. There's sometimes that's how life is, you know. What it does mean is that I may be able to do a side-by-side comparison, although I don't actually have enough RAM to do that, so we'll see how that goes. So yeah, as you can see, we've switched out the SSD switched out the hard drive from the SSD. Next thing to do is to get this graphics card in here. So you pop this little thing up here, hope that they stay in place. That's actually quite hard to show you that. So I'm just going to talk, slide this in here, and as mentioned earlier, I took the shroud, the kind of shroud thing off the graphics card so that it would fit in a single slot, because it did have VGA. And as you can see on these machines, that those things come up and then you just sort of pop this back in and it holds it in place. So now we're going to have to do a full Windows 10 update and upgrade, but I'm going to sort of either film or talk through some notable points, or I'll just chronicle the whole thing and speed it up. Probably the former. So we're just in the install, and I just set it up with Windows 10 Pro. The original system is Windows 10 Home, but I'm going to put this drive in another system and then activate it once I've done, and then get a dedicated SSD specifically for this desktop should it show a significant enough improvement. So I didn't put in a product key, I just put Windows 10 Pro for now. Otherwise it should be essentially exactly the same. And we're in. Not going to get too excited because it bullsed up loads of times before, but we've managed to get the SSD to boot and the install seems to be taking place. So after around 2 hours of faffing around, we appear to be on the path to getting Windows 10 to work. Touch wood. Where's some wood? There's some wood. Thankfully, after much faff, we are into Windows 10. We've got the graphics card installed, but that's it. And then we've got, hopefully somewhere in this list of stuff that is installing, we'll install what we need. But we've actually got Ethernet working now. I disabled it in BIOS trying to disable the PXE boot process. And I clicked the wrong thing, so that's interesting. So even in the install process, I can see that like everything I'm setting up and installing is just flying along. I cannot recommend enough to anyone without an SSD to get an SSD. But the problem we're having is we're having an inconsistent process of booting, so I don't know whether that's the limitations of the hardware or not, so I'll be back. So, inconsistent booting aside, we are going to run fraps. I'll be back, hold on. Alright, so here we are with the SSD and the nvidia 710 1GB graphics card. We're back in Half-Life. We're on all of these settings, which we've got trilinear as opposed to anisotropic ×2. Anti-aliasing off, high, enabled, blah 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 blah, DirectX 9. Oh, there we go. We're going to load the same level. And as you can see, our frame rate is up at 90 from 25, so let's run a little benchmarky, benchmark. We're just doing the same level. It looks much nicer, the colours are brighter, it's more vivid, but essentially exactly the same, but with average frame rate up in the 90s. Now that can be contributed primarily by the graphics card, obviously, but it just goes to show, like, the loading time on the actual game, like opening the game, was seconds instead of about 30 or 40 seconds. The overall performance is dramatically increased, as you can see in the top left. And yeah, let's see what's down this scary staircase. We'll review the... oh, we're in some water now. Okay, cool. So we can see, and this is obviously mainly contributed to by the graphics card, but of 1617 frames over that many milliseconds, we've got average frame rate 97, minimum 79, maximum 112 in Half-Life 2. And our whole library is massively opened up for what we can play. But the next thing we're going to do is run Passmark. I'm not going to make you sit through it, so I'm going to run it and then I'll be back with the results. Then we can draw a comparison later on. So as we can see from rough memory, I think we've got 540 something.1. We're now on 1511. CPU is about the same. Graphics obviously is massively ramped up. Memory is about the same, but disk mark is like way higher. But we will come back and compare those later on. And we can see here as well that we've gone up from the 5th percentile, which is extremely low, to the 28th, which is passable. It's in the orange now in comparison to the rest of the world. And of the world average of 2,728, we're now on 1,510, so it's a significant upgrade. Now we're just going to run user bench again on also processor, graphics, fixed drives, memory and USB, and see how it goes. We'll be back. So I can't actually remember the scores off the top of my head, but I remember this was 0.52 and it's gone up to 3.2. 52.7 is definitely like a huge boost, so this is what we were sort of looking at with the boot drive. It's still 12% for gaming, it's higher for desktop, like 5% or 2% higher for workstation, but we'll compare that in a minute. So the CPU is again performing above. GPU not so great, but we're not here for the GPU. And I think this is possibly the issue we were having anyway, so it's the SSD is not performing as fast as it should because it's not connected to a SATA 3 port, and I believe that the system doesn't actually have a SATA 3 port, so that's probably a limit to what we can do there, and the RAM is fine. So I'll pull up the comparisons and then we'll go through them properly. So on the right we have the Passmark rating from the original setup. Now obviously these top, that one and that one should be almost identical, which they are, the CPU. 3D graphics is not actually that far off. Sorry, 2D graphics not far off, but 3D graphics is hugely, but that's irrelevant. What we're looking for is disk mark. So we got 656 originally up to 2,259. So there's a huge boost in performance there, just based on the synthetics. I couldn't actually find the stored version of the user bench, which is set up, which was annoying. But yeah, in general, like I think we've established that the system runs much better. The problem is there's a limitation because it's only SATA 2, so the SSD isn't running at its full capacity. So it's still a boost in general performance, and in regards just things like this, like opening files and how quickly and efficiently things open. There's a massive boost in performance, but you're not going to find that you're getting the full whack from the SSD because it's only SATA 2. But like opening Half-Life, that literally is taking seconds instead of, like, it was around 45 seconds to a minute to open it last time. But as you can see, there isn't that issue with it, and it runs more fluidly. So basically I think we've seen a significant improvement, but then there is limitations in terms of what you can expect from the computer because of the CPU. So in a future video I may look at upgrading the CPU to a quad core. I think you can use the Q9400. It's currently the what is it? Let's have a look. E8400 at 3 GHz. So it's the same speed CPU but with 2 more cores. So I'm going to consider updating that. But yeah, in general I've seen like quite a significant improvement in just response time and like the boot time. I'm going to show you in a second and compare them. But overall, I'd say that it's a worthwhile upgrade, but not necessarily on this motherboard in terms of maximising the potential of the SSD, but it would definitely speed up the system. So we're going to boot them at the same time. Boop. Now there might be some trouble, but we're just booting to the desktop at the moment, so we'll see how long that takes. But because of the SATA 2, SATA 3 conflict thing, I've been having some issues with booting, but essentially, there we go. So let's see, desktop. So we've cut down the boot time by around 10 seconds, and this is only the second or third time I've booted the system, so actually that will get much shorter over time due to the optimization within the SSD and what programs you use and stuff in general, but it's still cut down by 10 seconds. And then the actual speed and functionality of which it goes from here to the desktop is significantly reduced as well. So what have we concluded from this? Basically, yes, there will be quite a significant performance upgrade in terms of responsiveness and opening files and how it reacts in general, but we're not going to see the full capacity of the SSD. So if you can afford it, if it's a rational decision for you to do that, then yes, perhaps consider upgrading to an SSD, but bear in mind it will be limited by the SATA 2 speeds, which essentially means that the SSD is not going to be functioning to its full capacity. I've been TechDave. Thank you. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the other side.